Hello there friends and welcome. Today's video is about a new game that's just been released last week on early access, V-Rising, a pretty neat sandbox survival RPG with crafting, combat and all that. For this guide in particular, I hope to show you some nice beginner tips to get your character and base or castle going, so you can take on the many threats the game has to offer. So let us get started, and first with some pretty useful mechanics that you should learn about. Now for this guide, I'll be hosting a private game, just to make it easier to explain the mechanics and so on. But as a multiplayer game, the choice is up to you. You can go full online play and then choose between PvE or PvP servers, or even just play fully solo. Now if you're going for PvP, I strongly suggest you do it with at least a single friend, otherwise chances are you're probably going to get ganked, so keep that in mind. But all the tips I'll show you also apply to PvP servers, that is. Right, so as soon as you make your character and exit the starter crypt area, you can enter the Farbane Woods. I recommend you start at the East Farbane Woods. We want to reach the area somewhere around here as to build our first castle. The reason is it's pretty much at the center of the first area of the game, so close to quite a lot of nice resource gathering areas and dungeons. But there are some other areas you can use, such as this spot here for example. Usually the areas that have a wild range to them, so you really have space for your castle. Also, I strongly recommend you keep to the main quests at your journey to the upper left side here, as they will help you go through the game's mechanics. Reaching our first castle area will of course require some walking, and as a vampire, if you stand out in the sun for too long, you'll soon take lots of damage and most likely end up dying. The way to avoid that is pretty simple, so whenever you are traveling during the day, keep to the shadows and also the shade at the environment, usually close to trees and other objects. And of course, ideally you definitely don't want to destroy the trees that are protecting you with their shade. And don't forget that to heal your character, you have to use the Blood Mend ability, at least at the start. So by choosing left control and then Blood Mend, preferably away from the sun. This will of course cost some of your blood, which you can replenish by drinking from enemies, after reducing them to low health and pressing F. Alright, so after you make your way right to where my character is, we can finally get started into building our base or castle. And it all starts with the castle heart. So first things first, to build your castle, press B, which lets you access the building tab. Then of course the castle heart. I recommend this somewhere around here, the middle of the area. I can't place it here though because it's being blocked by something, as you can read there in the bottom. So let's free the area first. To keep your castle heart healthy, you have to feed it blood essences. The second step is to create borders to expand your territory, and they always go from the castle heart itself. And of course they also work as the ground where you'll put objects and other buildings on. So that's a nice area we have covered. After setting your heart and your borders properly, the second step is to protect it with palisades, or the so-called walls. But of course chances are first you'll have to destroy the environmental objects that are blocking them, like trees and so on. So now our castle is fully protected, but don't forget to actually make some gates as well. First by placing an entrance, and then the actual gate. Don't forget whenever you leave your castle to actually close the gates. Now we also need a coffin so we can rest, and a stash to keep all our items. Mist braziers are another very important item to build, because so long as you keep them well fed with bones, activate your mist brazier, and now our entire small camp area is covered in mist, so we are fully protected from the sun while crafting stuff and so on. Of course during night you won't need it, so you can simply toggle it off. Just don't forget to turn it on again when daylight comes. The next step is to build your actual refinement buildings, so the sawmill, and later the simple workbench, which requires planks. As for planks, simply leave some of your lumber inside the sawmill to get them. It will take a while to produce, so ideally you want multiple refinement buildings to speed up the process. So the next step is to build a simple workbench, so we can actually craft stuff and upgrade our gear. Which brings me to another point. Leveling up is somewhat different in V-Rising. There aren't any classical levels by default like your character level, but you have our item levels, or gear level. For example, my character here has gear level 10, and that's how you upgrade your character, by getting better gear. When it comes to your workbench, you can thankfully craft multiple items at the same time, and you don't have to stay at the workbench, you can do other stuff while crafting, including while during combat, so keep that in mind. But remember, once you finish crafting, you do have to actually loot your workbench by right-clicking your items. So now my gear level is 17 after upgrading almost everything. After your crafting bench, you'll want a blood altar. This is a very important object to build. It can actually track all of the bosses in the game. For example, by choosing track blood and the alpha wolf, you'll get this bloodline leading you towards the boss. Most importantly, be sure to check beneath each boss the rewards you get from defeating them. This is especially useful for recipes, powers, and also crafting upgrades. For example, if you want to get access to leather to craft a lot of more powerful stuff, you'll have to first defeat Kili the Frost Archer, which gets you the tannery to refine animal hides into leather. And since we are talking about blood, another pretty important mechanic is blood type. By hovering over your blood pool, you can see which type you have at the moment. To change it, simply drink the blood of a living enemy. While feeding, you'll be able to see what blood type you'll get. Each blood type has different stacking benefits to your character. Worker blood, for example, is pretty great for increased resource yield. So whenever you want to farm your stones, woods and what have you. Now before you head for the first boss, the Alpha Wolf, I recommend you build a furnace with copper ore. Then of course refine some copper ore so we can get copper ingots. Copper veins have this orange tint to them, so it's pretty easy to find them. Now while you can find some copper veins while exploring the wilderness, ideally you want to head for the Bandit Copper Mine to the west of the area I told you to build your castle at, so the center of the starter area. Remember, you can actually feed on the worker miner enemies to get the worker blood type for increased resource yield to make getting copper even easier. After getting enough copper ore and ingots, you can craft your copper spear at last. This is an amazing early game weapon with bonus damage against creatures, fast attack speed, great range, and most importantly its special attack skill 1000 spears that you get access by pressing Q by default, unleashes a very fast flurry of attacks. With it, defeating the first initial bosses like the Alpha Wolf will be mostly a breeze. Lastly, don't forget to build a research desk, as to unlock new technology for buildings, armor, weapons, and even magic later on. You can actually use books you find to unlock new technologies, and then picking research. Or when it comes to a random technology, using paper and the discover option. Alright friends, so this should be it for my initial beginner's tips guide for V-Rising. I hope you found this useful. Be sure to comment down below if you think I missed something, if you have any other nice tips for me, as I haven't really played the game that long so far. Please remember to like, subscribe and support the channel if you can, by also becoming a member or leaving a nice super thanks. Thank you for watching and see you next time friends.